But we are here today in part to talk about how we keep people healthy at work, because in part that's what you do. And that's important for so many reasons, not just for the individual, but obviously for the company and indeed for the economy. So I thought we might start with the CBI quote. When I started the work for government, it took me quite a while to get the CBI really interested in what I suspect they thought was soft and fluffy, looking after people's health at work, really being interested in their well-being. But increasingly, and with this particular report getting better, they really took on this agenda and said the world is getting more complex, and in the UK we need to compete on the qualities of what we do, and that makes staff performance and productivity vital, and therefore workplace health is essential to both. Now, just if we thought for a moment about what are the things that keep us from being healthy at work, and the two biggest ones in this country are common mental health problems and musculoskeletal problems. Note, I haven't put diseases there. They're not diseases, they're symptoms. Medically, you can't define stress and anxiety. They don't come within a medical a dictionary. And yet they cause so many people to either not function well at work or have to leave the workplace. But I think beneath them, because that's often what's written on the medical certificate, in fact, is the quality of work and the quality of the workplace. So people do say they've got low back pain, but if you really ask them what is the matter, if they're being honest, they'll often tell you, I don't really get on with my line manager, and I don't really like my workplace. It is far more than the thing that is just put on that medical certificate. So it's the absence of good work. And that is something you must all surely be really interested in. Of course, there are other things. There are long-term serious illness. There's psychosocial, home-related problems. There's lack of education and skills. But the top two there are numerically the ones that cause us so much trouble. And mental health is an absolute priority for the labour market. This is really taken from the OECD's report, 2011. But you can see there that the ILO estimates the cost conservatively at 3 to 4% of gross domestic product in the EU. And it is often the common mental health problems. Thank goodness we haven't got any more schizophrenia or bipolar disorders around in the UK. It is, are we stressed, anxious, and do we have mild depression? Now, there are so many key workers in this array. As you can see there, I've tried to list them. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about them all this morning. And I'm particularly interested in the role of the employer and, of course, your interaction there with everyone else who's in that space is crucial. And I think there's an interesting change, well, I hope there is, in what is happening to occupational health, because it has in this country been quite old-fashioned. And I'd like to think that they are beginning to move to a much more proactive occupational health rather than this very reactive, let's deal with the problem once it's there, and they're solving problems rather than preventing them. But you do need, just to emphasize again, all of these people to play their part. But to think about these crucial interfaces, it's the interface between the work you do, good or bad, the needs of the employer and the society and the economy and the health and well-being of your employees. And I think it's that crucial interface that, that we should concentrate on. So I've made here a list of what I think are some of the essential enablers of health, well-being and resilience in the workplace. There are others, but I think these come pretty well top of my list. I've mentioned good work and workplaces. Not going to talk at all today about how the GP interacts with this interface, but the medical certificate, the fit note, is obviously crucially important. We need proactive reformed occupational health. Staff engagement, we know, relates to very important things in the health service, which is my background. Those hospitals where staff have a high engagement score have a lower mortality rate, so check the engagement score of a hospital before you go into it. Leadership needs to be empowering, not disempowering, and you must have supportive managers. And if you want to do this really well, you need to integrate conventional health and safety, occupational health, your HR function, and everything that's going on around promotion of health and prevention of ill health. So I think these are some of the really essential things. I can't go through all of the things which have been written about as providing good work and good workplaces. I hope that you will agree with them. With these, you might wish to add to them, but these are taken from various writings. I've looked at the work of the Work Foundation, particularly of Michael Marmot, but they're all crucially important things. And I'm just going to look at one or two of them. You might think that if you've got back pain, the predictors of the severity of that back pain would be, have you slipped a disc? Have you been doing too much gardening? Etc., etc. But you can see from this piece of research that comes from Scandinavia, the most consistent predictors were, do you have control at work? In your work area, are you controlling some of it? It's absolutely crucial. Do your leaders empower you or disempower you? And is that leadership fair leadership? Just taking an example again from the place I know best, which is the health service, boards there do make a difference. There is an increasing drive at the moment in the NHS to improve health and well-being for our staff. And those hospitals that have engaged board members to be the champions of health and well-being, to sit on the health and well-being committee in that hospital, to take it seriously, to report it back to the board on a regular basis, they tend to get this leadership thing much better. You can see there, this is York Teaching Hospital. By doing that, not only was it a much better place to work, but they delivered a sickness absence saving of 2.7 million and a reduction, a very considerable reduction in long-term sickness absence. I think if I only had money to invest in one thing, I would definitely invest it in the training of line managers. If your manager has just been promoted because they're technically competent, which is often what we do, then how are they going to manage people well? So the idea that training managers for people management is soft and fluffy is absolutely not right. And again, I've taken an example from Denmark. The Scandinavians have been very good at doing this type of research. They've been doing it for longer than us, and they've taken a great interest in it. This was in a Danish local government organisation. There was poor morale, lack of role clarity, and a lack of meaningful work. And so they did a nice experiment in which they did have a control group, very important. And the intervention was really quite simple in a way. It was improved team working, but with this extra control given to the employees. And then either the managers were proactive about this intervention or they didn't take much notice of it. So did active middle management support for the intervention make a difference? And there you can see that it certainly did, because the results showed that active middle management, as perceived by the employees, correlated with job satisfaction and well-being. So we know that middle management is crucially important. So I would say train your line managers in effective communication, awareness of the issues, development of an open culture. We know again in lots of our hospitals that there are those courses available. They're not mandatory. So the uptake is around 19%. they don't have to do them. I suspect if it was a financial course that was being offered, there would be a much greater uptake than that. And this is something I mentioned a little bit earlier, but this integration of all the bits that lead to what the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health in the USA talk about, total worker health. So here you're integrating all those things. You don't have them sitting in different bits of your organization. And there is growing evidence that if you do this, you do enhance and create synergy. You get better health and well-being, and you decrease the likelihood of workplace injury and illness. And it's easy to say, actually quite difficult to do. But if you think about it as on this graph, where the horizontal line is, everything underneath that line is what we've all thought of as regulation about safety, the conventional stuff that all organizations employing people will do. So harm minimization, compliance systems, and culture, reducing illness, injury, etc. And that, of course, is important, but eventually it will plateau out, and you're not going to get your extra gain from that. What you need to do is bring it together with health promotion and prevention of ill health, organizational health, and so you can go on the top bit and gradually get gains in company performance, gains in health and well-being and fitness. So it's really linking these two things together. I mentioned that occupational health needs to change. I've been saying that to my occupational health colleagues since 2008. It really has to suit the current profile of employment because work is changing. And I think so often if you buy in your occupational health, you sort of buy it off a shelf rather than saying, well, for my workers with this particular set of challenges, I want this sort of occupational health. So often people are not good customers in a way. They don't shop very well, I don't think, for this service. So I would like to see occupational health changed. I'd like it to make a greater contribution to the national economy and to be involved before, during, and after illness. And obviously that anybody who provides occupational health to any organisation should either be accredited to the new national standards for occupational health or at least on the way to getting them. And very recently there's been a lot of work at the Faculty of Occupational Medicine, and these, I've just put them up as some of the changes that are now being discussed as necessary to improve occupational health in the NHS. So a paradigm shift from being in the back office, which is where often occupational health professionals sit, to being frontline support for patients and healthcare staff. Improve public access to occupational health expertise. Very difficult for anybody of the public just to get expertise, and we've never had it really available to our general practitioners. Empowering staff, listening to them, making sure you know what they would want for their well-being, and it varies. Again, I've just given you this example from the Walton Centre in Liverpool. When they asked their employees what was most important to their health, they said they wanted things which increased their activity and their physical health. They might have said something quite different. And over the years, I've collected all kinds of examples of what people think would make a difference to their well-being. But here, it was improving physical health, improving activity, and the staff helped to design it. And again, apart from increased personal fitness, there was a halving of sickness absence, as you can see there. So it's empowering staff within the right environment. But I think if you are not happy and well at work, I won't eat the fresh fruit. I will go and buy the Mars bar. I mean, if you just are unhappy, then I don't think you're going to do... It's no use just putting the fruit out and having a bicycle scheme. That is not well-being at work. And I thought I must tell you the story of my train driver, my underground train driver. When I became National Director for Health and Work, I asked the Department of Health if they would arrange for me to go and visit people who I thought had boring jobs. I wanted to understand how could they ever do that job day in, day out. And probably the most amazing one to me was my morning on the Bakerloo line with my train driver on the early morning shift. I joined him Baker Street tube station. All starts off about 5 o'clock in the morning. And I was thoroughly irritating to him because I said after about an hour, couldn't we do the Jubilee line? Or what about the, the Hammersmith and Circle line? And I said, do you always do the morning shift, this shift, and have to be here so very early? What about the afternoon shift? And I said, even best of all, would your employer let you have 3 weeks underground, but a week in the offices above, a change, so you're not always in these dark tunnels and driving a train. When he dropped me off, he was very, very pleased to drop me off. I mean, he simply said to me, look, this is my train. I'm so frustrated with me. I'm responsible for the safety of everyone who is behind me. I give the orders. Nothing happens in this train, but that I make it happen. And so he was really telling me he had control. He then said, I like the early morning shift. It suits my family. I don't want another line. I like the Bakerloo line. We're a team, and we help each other out. So if somebody's got to go for a hospital appointment, we stand in for each other. We're a team on the Bakerloo line on the early morning shift. And he said, we've got good occupational health, and I'm well paid. So, I mean, that was good work, but I imagined it would be terrible work. But he's had all the right ingredients to make it good. Does it matter where you start with your health and well-being programme? I think not. You have to have those other things in place first, the things about management, organisation of work, and good work. And then there really is a variety of things after consultation with employees that you might put in place around mental health, around physical health, around lifestyles. I've been to organisations where they've formed choirs, where they've got allotments, a lovely place down in Cornwall where there's enough room for them to have allotments next to the place of work, and reading groups, all kinds of things. But do workplace wellness programs work? Because some people are cynical, and it's difficult to get good evidence. Just going to show you 2 pieces of evidence that have come out in the last year. This is a review of reviews that was done at the Johns Hopkins institution in Baltimore. And they were looking, and remember, these are US programs, so they will be slightly different because the employer picks up the bill for your health care and your drug bill. But you can see there what was best and promising practice: health education, supportive environments, this integration with HR of all the other bits of the structure that are necessary, links between health promotion and other related programs, such as those which might be available to employees to support their mental health. And it works if the goals are aligned to the business, and if possible, if you've used what evidence there is out there. Although, as I've mentioned, it is not an area that is evidence-rich. And if you're only doing it to save money, well, it may not be worth it. You have to be doing it for a few other reasons as well. And this was just in The Economist, reported in 2014. Again, a US survey of 255 executives, 630 full-time employees. And the executive views there was the benefit to the employer, even without the business case, because of these intangible benefits. What did they think? About 30% there. Can be cost effective, but only if supported by appropriate data collection, and helps company be employer of choice, forming parts of progressive HR strategy. So one needs to at least feel that when you're going to do these programs, there is some evidence behind this and give you an idea of the gains that you may get. And finally, Britain's healthiest company, this was last year, the 2014 data published in the Telegraph on Sunday. And this was a collaboration between Mercer, Prue Health and Vitality, the University of Cambridge and RAND Europe. And you can see there, employer survey. You had to have adequate data to be able to enter this competition. 82 companies had that. Quite a nice mix across small, medium and large. And you can see the conclusion there. Average cost of absence and presenteeism, about 7.84% of a company's wage bill. No surprises here, remembering what I said right at the very beginning. Stress came out as a very strong driver for higher work impairment and financial concern too. And I think that is often the case. When people are really worried financially, then they naturally become anxious and stressed. But you can see it there, the mental health. Employers with high or medium risk of mental ill health averaged 16.9% higher work impairment score. And it's quite some interesting work here. I'd never thought much. I thought sleep was important. But here you can see the effects of sleep and that getting more hours sleep is better for you as far as performance at work and leads to less impairment of your working function, but also lifestyle. And again, obesity is a challenge for really being able to perform maximally in some particular jobs, because it's also associated with high blood pressure and a high glucose level. So I think the sequence is good work and good workplaces for me comes first. I think if you get that right, it will lead to employee well-being and engagement. You do get increased productivity. There is an improvement in the quality of the product. So what, for example, we're trying to do in the hospitals of the country is improve quality of care for patients. That's the quality of that product there, but you will all be in organizations that produce other kinds of products. We want to reduce sickness absence, and we want to reduce staff turnover. So I will leave you at that point with those thoughts. I've seen a fantastic improvement in how we do this throughout the United Kingdom in the last 5 or 6 years. I think so many different companies are making a huge effort, but I do think that there is more to do, and I think you and your profession has a huge part to play in this and to make it possible for it to really all come together. So thank you very much.
Dave and Carol, thank you so much. I think we all learned a great deal from that. We do have a little bit of time for a couple of questions. Won't keep you too long before we bring in Dave. I was interested by what you said about this emphasis in the US on total health. I mean, admittedly, this isn't something that I'm an expert on or something I know much about, but I was just curious as to who or what has been the driving force behind that, and why you said at the end there that we are seeing changes here in the UK, but why hasn't it been at quite the same pace over here?
Well, the next speaker, Dave, may disagree with me. I don't think it's been particularly any faster in the USA in its in its extent. But I think what was very good for me was an institute that is greatly respected in the USA, has now embraced this idea that you go beyond ordinary health and safety. You really start to care about the health of the whole person and their well-being.
What prompted that?
Well, I think you can only get so far, as one of those graphs shows. With the conventional stuff, you'll get so far. But if you don't put the rest in and you don't really concern yourself about mental well-being, about total worker health, then I don't think you can get that other part of the curve going up.
One common strain on employees, the common strains, you mentioned a few of them there, whether you're talking about health concerns or back pain or financial troubles, lack of sleep. Often, you know, one problem can lead to another and it's a vicious cycle. How do you sort of try to take care of people or try and engage with them to sort of figure out if everything's okay and what you can do to help? You know, to a certain extent, you're running a business and, you know, you can't be the person's counselor, but it is in the best interests of the company to know what's going on without sort of prying or...
Well, I think this is where, first of all, I do think you should be using your line managers to train them in this awareness, to be able to ask the appropriate questions. Some companies use health champions who will pick up clues. Mental health first aid, in which you teach employees who wish to be trained to pick up signs in their friends and their mates at work, and have probably a discussion which is not maybe as threatening as that with your line manager. So I think it can be done in lots of ways, and I think you have to establish the atmosphere of it is all right to talk about these things.
And that comes from the top. Thing. Yeah.
It comes right from the top. If the culture is, we are really concerned about your well-being and we want it to improve and we're here to be supportive, you can feel that. You know whether that's there. And if it's not at the top and coming down, it doesn't happen.
And I guess that's about greater emotional intelligence in your line managers.
It is.
And I love the story about the Bakerloo line train driver, and I really like that because you sort of came to him with the same approach I might do, and I don't know, working in news, you know, I've worked all sorts of shift patterns and I've done terrible shifts before, but I love that this, and I've met other people who've said this as well, that they might be working a shift that seems, you know, insane to you and me, but they love it because the early shift fits in with his family life. He loved that he was in charge of the safety of passengers and he really loved being part of that team. What if you're dealing with an employee that isn't happy in that situation, that they hate doing the early shift? I'm not talking about myself, but I mean, you know, they hate doing the early shift. They don't quite fit in the team. It's affecting their well-being, but they're in, you know, that's the job that the company needs them to do.
Well, I think they're often the sort of people who will go off sick.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, often if you're so unhappy, you can try dealing with it in so many ways, but it's the sort of thing that either leaves you not working well, so presenteeism, or I think going off. And when I did my report for government on sickness absence, I met lots of people who were on sickness absence who said, I'd like to work, but I am never going back to that job. I can't go back to it. I just, you know, it is making me sick. And so it was like putting a square peg in a round hole. And of course, none of this is easy. And if you don't feel you've got the sort of relationship with your line manager where you can talk about it, or somebody there you can talk to, then I think you'll take an alternative route to escape. Yeah.
So much of this, just I want to pick your brain about one final thing. I guess much of this is about engaging people and kind of getting them to feel comfortable enough to talk to you. But the difficulty is that much of this is also to do with the overall culture in a company, and that has to come from the top. So what if you're not, you know, CEO or whatever at the top, you're working in a place where that isn't the culture? What can you personally do to sort of improve internal relationships with employees to foster that?
I mean, I have seen organisations where this is so. I think often you can improve the culture if you've got a good few people in your little bit of that organisation, because often organisations are made up of bits, you know, they're little departments. So I think you can, if all of you in your own space are keen to improve it, and you've got a good manager there, I think the difficulty is then it never really sings. You know, it's a local bit of the organisation.
But it's better than nothing, perhaps.
But much better than nothing. Yeah. Much better than nothing. And you do see that does happen.
Well, thank you ever so much. We all really enjoyed that, Professor Dame Carol Black. A great note to open on, I think.